Hi, I'm Michelle Chalfant, psychotherapist, holistic life coach, and human just like you, learning to navigate life's challenges. With over 25 years experience, I teach people how to get healthy using the adult chair model. The adult chair model is where simple psychology meets grounded spirituality, and it teaches us how to become healthy adults. From anxiety and depression to codependency and relationship issues, you can use the adult chair for just about anything. Each week, I share practical tips, tools, and advice from myself and a wide range of experts on how to get unstuck, how to live authentically, and how to truly love yourself, all while sitting in your adult chair. Welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast. I am Michelle Chalfant. Happy to be here with you today as we talk with the lovely Kris Carr. Yes, indeed. I'm so happy to be back from our summer break and having all the new guests come on. I love the shows that we had come out over the summer, but it's so fun to have all of our new guests on. I took some really healthy time off over the summer, but also really enjoyed reading comments and DMs from all of you. What I found was so many people were writing in asking me about relationship advice. And people were asking me, is this a healthy relationship? Is this healthy if I do this, or is this unhealthy? So what I did was I came up with something for you guys. It's absolutely free. It is called, what I termed it was 5 healthy relationship myths. Because what I found was people aren't quite sure what healthy versus unhealthy is all about. So I've got this for you guys. And what it is I define what the myths are, and then I give you tips to improve your relationship. You can access that at theadultchair.com/myths, MYTHS. That's again, theadultchair.com/myths. If you would like to get information on what the myths are for healthy relationships, and then, of course, tips for improving them. Okay, let us jump over to Kris Carr. What a great, timely podcast this was. It's timely because, number one, she has a brand new book coming out. It is called I'm Not a Mourning Person. That's MOURNING. Braving loss, grief, and the big messy emotions that happen when life falls apart. Let me tell you, I know I've shared with you guys, I am not a speed reader, but this book, I became a speed reader. When I find really good books, I don't know about you all, but I can read fast. And this was one of them. It was a beautiful, beautiful book about the death of her father. And boy, we got into it in the show. We talked all about Kris's story of learning to live with both grief and hope, what to say and not to say to someone who is grieving, what happens when we don't process grief, healthy ways to process grief, and taking a joy inventory of your life and why it's important. Kris really broke it all down for us. And boy, we had so much fun on the show. We got into some very heavy topics, but let me tell you, grief, I don't know why, grief is really important to me because I think about all the years I had to practice. I can't tell you the number of people that came in over the years that said, I don't know what to say to somebody when they've experienced a loss. And I would guide them on that. And the thing is, there's not a human on the planet that will not go through grief or have the possibility of going through grief, because everyone's going to go through loss. Everyone experiences people that have died, but grief comes in many shapes and forms. It might just not be around someone that's passed away. Grief can happen with a relationship ending or a divorce, a breakup, the loss of a job, or even the ending of a job. Even when we leave a job that we loved, there's a sadness, there's a sense of loss. It could be when someone moves or when we move away from a home. It might even be that we move, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes away. There's a mourning or a loss that happens maybe if we love the street that we lived on or the home that we were in. So there are many opportunities, and I say the word opportunity in all seriousness, to grieve. Because as you all know, if you listen to me at all, I'm all about feeling our emotions, and grief is an incredibly important emotion that we must learn what to do with, and that is to feel it. So we really, really talked about this so much today on today's show. All right, let me tell you a little bit about Kris Carr, if you don't by chance know who she is. She's been called a force of nature by O Magazine and was named a new role model by the New York Times. Kris is also a member of Oprah's Super Soul 100, recognizing the most influential thought leaders today. She's the subject and director of the documentary Crazy Sexy Cancer, which premiered at the SXSW Film Festival and aired on TLC and the Oprah Winfrey Network. Most exciting is her new book, again, I'm Not a Morning Person, which comes out September 19th, 2023. Here we go with the lovely Kris Carr. So welcome to the Adult Chair Podcast, Kris Carr.
Thanks for having me, Michelle.
Oh my goodness. I was just sharing with you before we started here what an important topic grief is. And we don't know how to talk about it. We don't know what to do with it. And this book that you wrote, I'm going to hold it up for those that are looking at me on YouTube. Oh my goodness, everybody, listen, get this book. And I say to my podcast audience quite a bit, like, I'm not a fast reader. In fact, I'm more of like an Audible kind of girl. Like, I want to listen to my books, but I've got to tell you something. I picked this book up. Bam, I was hooked. I was reading it so fast because it's so relatable. So thank you for writing this book, because this world needs this book. I'm Not a Morning Person. That's Mourning. So yes, Kris Carr, tell us about this book. Tell me first of all, or tell us, I should say, and I know, but for those people that are listening that don't know anything about this book, what inspired you to write this book?
You know, Michelle, we were talking, as you said beforehand, and grief is such a touchy topic.
Yep.
And sometimes it can be hard to even approach the idea of learning more about it, because it's like, oh, hell no, I don't want to talk about that. MoveOn.org,
Right.
But I got to a place in my own life where I couldn't avoid it anymore, because it was really shortening my joy. I felt like it was boxing in my possibilities. And I felt like, in many ways, grief is a master healer. And it teaches us so much about what matters, about living fully, about, just who we are and why we're here. And so it came at a very critical time in my life. It was like I was at a tipping point. So I was on the verge of reaching my 20-year anniversary of living with stage 4 cancer. So I've been living with stage 4 cancer for over 2 decades. So I was approaching that. My father was dying of terminal pancreatic cancer. My business was struggling, and we were in the middle of a global pandemic. So even if I wanted to write about something else, I couldn't. And so the reason why it's called I'm Not a Morning Person, which, is a cheeky title, but the subtitle is Braving Loss, Grief, and the Big Messy Emotions That Happen When Life Falls Apart. The reason why I call it I'm Not a Morning Person is because I didn't want to be, but I couldn't hold that emotion back any longer and expect to be whole.
So, wow. And I just think that we as humans, not even male or female, because female, I mean, I had a private practice for 20 years, and we just don't want to feel, we don't want to feel this. We don't want to go into the negative emotion zone. If emotions are on that spectrum of love to fear, we don't want to go in that side of the spectrum at all. And grief is sitting right there glaring at all of us, because there's not a human that's on the planet that's not going to lose someone, an animal, a human, at something. and have this experience of grief. The question is, though, again, and I think I want to get to this, but like, what happens if we don't feel it? Which I don't want to go there quite yet.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
happens in the body? But yeah. So you've been living with stage 4 cancer for 20 years.
Yes.
What kind of cancer is that?
I have a sarcoma. So I have a very rare sarcoma, which affects the soft tissue. And my cancer is slow growing. So in some ways that's very helpful. But it can become aggressive. So for the last 20 years, I've been in this sort of watch and wait, let cancer make the first move relationship. And because of that, there's a lot of grief and loss that I experienced early on, and I will continue to experience. But in the beginning stages of, my journey with cancer, still that was not an emotion that I went near. I just kind of hit the ground running. Let's find a cure. Let's figure out how to take better care of myself. All the things that have been in many ways very positive because it's what I teach, and I've written 7 books and I've helped a lot of people. So there's a lot of positives there, but it really wasn't until my dad was diagnosed and all those other things were going on that I mentioned that the old grief and trauma of my diagnosis just came rushing forward, even though I thought I had done so much work on it. So it was like this perfect storm of like, yay, personal growth. Here we go.
Wow. So talk about something that you mentioned in the book is ruptures.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. What does that even mean?
Yeah, this is a term that I use, and the ruptures or the losses, as you said, none of us are going to get out of this life scratch free and stain resistant.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. And I think we live in a very black and white binary world, and we use specific language that can be very, I think, harmful for people. Like, let's just take the example of cancer, but this is not the only example of when we say this person won, this person lost their battle to cancer, right? So we're winners or losers. And I think all of that makes it more complicated when we face a rupture. So it's that moment when, to me, when the rug feels like it was pulled out from under you, an unexpected change, a tragedy, you lose your job, the diagnosis, someone in your life dies or someone in your life is diagnosed and they're likely going to die, the miscarriage, your husband cheating on you and leaving you for the neighbor. Like, these are ruptures, and these ruptures happen big and small. And as I said, nobody's immune to them.
Right.
But what I have found, and so well, especially with your background, is that the only way out of these ruptures is through them. And yet, growing up in a grief-phobic, messy emotions averse society, the last place we want to go is through them, because I think for many of us, and I speak about myself mostly, is I equate going through with falling apart. Like, it'll take me under, I'll drown, all of the metaphors that many people commonly use with grief. And that's not the case, as you know.
Right. So what is true? I love that you brought that up, because over the years, oh my goodness, so many of my clients, they'd say, don't make me cry. I'm like, I can't make you cry. But however, I know how healing it will be if you do allow yourself to go there. And so many, I lost track of how many people over the years, but they'd say, if I start, I'm never going to stop. If I let that, the tears start flowing, that's going to be the end of me. I'm like, okay, no. So what is true for you when it comes to grief and allowing yourself to go there? Yeah. Talk a little bit about that, because that's a lot. I'm thinking about, 20 years of living with stage 4. I mean, that's big. Stage 4 cancer. That's a big, big deal. And then I would think about that for me, myself, all the time. I mean, and then all of a sudden with your father going through this, it just feels like, did everything just come together all at once? And then you couldn't even resist feeling that grief? Because I know I'm asking like 4 questions right now as I'm talking. Like, there's a question, there's a question, there's a question. Yeah,
I
it's
can hit
just
them.
so much. It feels like it's so much. And I'm thinking about you thinking, nope, not going to go there. And I don't know, I'm projecting my thought on you, but
Yeah.
tell us what that was like. And then even opening the door for grief. Like,
Yeah, let's start there because I
yeah.
gave a keynote lecture recently and I had the whole audience do this, and it was thousands of people in the audience, and it was really powerful. And, I had everybody like hold their hands up and like pretend that they're pushing against something, and like
Mhm.
imagining grief as waves in the ocean, because it is the metaphor that many people
Mhm.
use.
Mhm.
And you're pushing and you're holding back those waves. And of course, in the beginning, like let's say you actually can hold back waves in the ocean. But after a while, those waves are going to start to stack. And
Yeah.
no matter how strong or how powerful you are, which each and every one of us is, you're not more powerful than the ocean. You're not.
That's a great analogy.
And you can imagine that the more you're pushing, the more you're holding, the more pain you're actually feeling in your body, in your
Mhm.
spirit, in your mental well-being.
Yeah.
And then there's another option, which
Yeah.
is to say, what if I dive through these with each wave? What if I dive through it? Yes, it's scary to hold my breath. Yes, it's scary to be underwater. What
Mhm.
if I dive through and in and through and in and through? And maybe eventually the tides will recede. The ocean doesn't go away,
Right. Right.
but maybe it will recede, and there's sunshine and there's sandcastles and there's things around the ocean as well.
Mhm.
And so what I have found for myself is the hole in my heart that I will always have with my father's loss. It's okay to have a hole in my heart. It's okay, because I think, going back to this idea that we live in a society that likes to have put bows on things, as well as, the
Yep.
black and white. We want everything to be perfect and right and whole and safe and la la la, because
Yep.
we're humans and humans hate uncertainty.
Right.
Right. And so, but if I can make peace with and accept the fact that there's a hole in my heart, and that's okay, I can build other things around that hole, right? I can build a wonderful new friendship with my friend Michelle. I can have new experiences, new joys, new opportunities.
Mhm.
And I can also have that little hole in my heart.
Mm. So do you think that at some point that the hole in the heart gets like a scab over it, or does it heal, or does it get smaller over time, or is it always there in your opinion?
I don't know. We'll have to do 10 years from now. We're going to do
Yeah.
another interview.
Okay, good.
Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I know that some holes that I've had in the past, yes, they soften, they scab over.
Mhm.
Maybe some of those holes are filled with new love, new
Mhm.
opportunities. I was talking on a podcast recently of like, I'm over my ex. Like,
Yeah.
I'm definitely over my ex. Do you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? So
Yeah.
I think it just depends. But I think the point is what I have learned from this process, and doing a lot of research as well, is
Mhm.
emotions are information. Right. So I've said to people all along the way that food is information for your body, for your cells, right? That's what it is.
Mhm.
And I have found for myself that emotions are information, and they're just teaching me more about what's truly going on.
Mhm.
And as I said earlier, we can't amputate any of them and expect to be whole. So I can't say, yes, there will be a time when grief isn't present.
Mm.
I don't know that. And
Yeah.
I want to welcome all of the parts of me and all of the emotions to the table, because I think that that's a friendly table that I want to sit at.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I like that a lot, actually. I think about, excuse me, my own father dying. And it's so interesting. Of course, most people do know the stages of grief, but it's hard to put a timeline on it, isn't it?
Yeah. You
Right?
know, I think about the stages is, I don't think that they were ever intended to be linear.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's the thing that people
Sure.
get caught up on. And then they'll be really critical of the stages. Um, I totally agree with you about the timeline. And also, I've just read so many people say that there isn't one. And I
Mhm.
think that gives us some freedom, because if we go back to the idea that we live in a grief phobic society, how
Mm.
many times have you, the griever, heard, aren't you over that yet?
Yeah.
To which you want to maybe break the person in half.
Yes.
You know?
At the least, we want to punch them in the face.
Yeah, just a little.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
like, no, I'm not. And also, why should I be? And why should I be on your timeline?
Yeah.
This is my timeline. And so when we are going through that, just understanding, I have a chapter in the book that's called Awkward Times, Awkward People.
Mm-hmm. Oh, talk about that a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we don't know what we're doing and everybody's afraid to get stuff wrong. Sometimes we put words together that aren't supposed to go together.
Yeah.
And if you've done that, forgive yourself and say, hey, you know what? I screwed up. I'm going to do better next time.
Yeah.
You know, but certainly putting some sort of timeline on it is one of those. I used to call them cancer faux pas. This is my first book is for cancer patients. And I wrote a whole section about cancer faux pas, and it's the shit people say to you.
Yeah.
It's really unhelpful. Like, you know, oh gosh, you've just been diagnosed. How long do you have to live?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Right. Because we slow down at car wrecks. Okay. It's how many of you have slowed down a car? You would just want to see, like, is everybody okay in there? Right.
Yeah.
So people say those things, or they say, oh no, you were diagnosed with that. Oh, wow. My cousin had that. She died. You know, again, trying to have connection and really missing the mark.
Yeah.
And so learning just a little about the landscape of grief, I think, can not only help us as grievers, but also as humans, because as you said so beautifully, we're all going to go through loss at some point.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a moment. Because I remember having a lot of clients over the years asking me the same question. What do I say? My so-and-so just got a divorce. My so-and-so just lost their fill in the blank. What do I say? I'd like to hear from you. What can people that are listening to this show today, what would be beneficial to say to somebody that has gone through a loss?
Yeah. I talk about this a lot in the book. So I give a lot of different ideas and examples. And I also talk about some of the common things that we unintentionally do. Like, for example, quickly changing the subject because you feel anxious or uncomfortable, or centering yourself because you feel anxious and uncomfortable. Like, oh, well, you went through that. Well, here's what I went through. Right. And it becomes all about you. Or, you know, sometimes another thing I talk about is like the teachable moment, you know, and having people look at the bright side. And if it doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And like, nobody
Time heals all wounds.
Yeah.
Like,
nobody wants to hear that.
Nobody wants to hear that. No, definitely not. Yeah. But people are very uncomfortable with someone that's going through grief. With really what it is, though, is it's not just grief. It's just the heaviness of grief. And they don't know what to say. We don't know what to say.
We don't. And so let me share what works for me, and know that I'm not a grief expert. I'm a hurting human like the other hurting humans watching this.
Yep.
There's nothing that you can say to make my pain go away.
Yep.
So it's not your responsibility to fix it.
Yeah.
It's your responsibility to be present and to be loving and to listen more than you speak. I think that that's the greatest gift that you can give somebody going through a difficult time, is just showing up for them and being willing to listen and being willing to actually say, I'm so sorry this is happening, and to be willing to talk about it, because it's so scary for you, the person putting yourself out there, to talk about it. And it's scary for the person who has nobody to talk to and feels very other in that moment.
So true. I love that. And even to say, I really don't know what to say. Like, hey, Kris, I'm so sorry about your father's passing. I don't know what to say, but I'm here. That's all you got to say.
Beautiful.
Like, because just like you say, there is nothing anybody can say or do to make the grief go away. Nothing. Zero. But showing up with presence is one of the best things we can do. And listen, and you almost took the words out of my mouth. I say that all the time, just as a human being, to feel witnessed is such a healing experience for us. And so again, it's not about the words, it's about, can you sit and hold presence and hold space for me while I'm crying, while I'm going to share with you stories about my whomever that passed away or about my whatever that happened to me. Just listen to me. That's it. It's such a healing experience, and it feels actually good on some level. So thank you for sharing that, because I know that that's a question that so many of us have around grief. So let's talk about, there's so much I want to ask you. Your dad. So tell us again about your dad and when he passed, and tell us a little bit about the journey with your dad and his final few years, honestly. It's such a beautiful story in the book about your dad. And anyway, I don't want to give away the books. I could go into it, but I'm not going to talk about that. But tell us in the final, the final few years with your dad and what that was like. And you guys were so close. I loved the relationship that you had with him.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, I'll start with when I found out he was sick. And I'll start here because I think many of us can relate to some of the things that I'm about to share. So I was finishing a big talk that I was giving for my work, and I had been kind of on a go, go, go schedule. And I had also just lost my dog. And so
Oh,
there was just a lot going on then.
yeah.
And this was in 2016. And I remember getting off the stage, doing this keynote, and then thinking to myself, now that this is over, I'm gonna live.
Oh.
Right.
Mhm.
And in the book I wrote that I was saying, like, once this is over, then I'll live. And whenever you find yourself saying that, something is, first of all, very off balance.
Mhm.
And secondly, there might be a rupture coming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So true. So
Like,
true. Yeah.
oopsie, I just said it. Can I take it back?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I literally got off the plane and I spent the night at my parents' house because they lived closer to the airport, and the plane was delayed and all this stuff. And when I arrived, it was midnight and my mom was sitting in the living room fully dressed, and I make a joke, in slacks, like nothing good happens
Oh, yeah.
when she's fully dressed
Yeah.
past midnight with the lights on, sitting in the living room in slacks. I was like, I'm 14. I'm in so much trouble.
You're grounded.
Totally. And she just said, I don't know how to say this. So I'm just going to say it. Dad has a mass on his pancreas. And that was like the inciting incident. And um,
Mm.
quickly it was about, what do we do? Building a team, like all the things that I know inside and out as somebody who's not only a cancer patient, but is, this is a big part of the work that I do, helping other patients.
Mhm.
And, but so that's a big through line throughout the book. But I think that
Mhm.
the way the book is structured is every chapter is either an emotion or an
Mm.
experience that you might go through when the rug gets pulled out from under you.
Yep.
And my dad's story is sort of like the through line.
Mhm.
And we went on a really special 4.5 year journey, because from the time he was diagnosed to the time he passed was about 4.5 years.
Mhm.
And it was about intentionally going to some of the most difficult, most cherished places that we as humans have the opportunity to go, from talking
Mhm.
about dying to, really putting together a so-called bucket list and having experiences while you still can. And then when you're not able to physically have those experiences, you're able to spend time in company and play gin rummy and, you
Mhm.
know, able to share so much like great fatherly wisdom that I pass on. It's like wisdom that every single one of us should experience.
Mhm.
And then through his passing and the relationship that I've been able to develop with my mom and a lot of the healing that we've been able to
Mm.
do. And so for me, this book is probably the most spiritual book I'll ever write,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
it was a very spiritual experience.
Yeah. Um, Gosh, it's such a beautiful book. Again, I was telling you before, I related to just so much of it. And my father didn't die of cancer. But it's not even, because it's not about that. It's the
Yeah.
emotions throughout the whole entire thing. Like you said, the whole book that you took us like on a ride with you is how I felt. Um, I'm laughing, but I'm not laughing at your dad's final days. I shouldn't be laughing because I related. You're having these tender moments with your dad, and then the neighbor with the pool with the jackhammer going up, and your comment in the book. I was like, that I get it. Like you're trying to have this beautiful experience with your dad, and then the guy with the pool with the jackhammer next to you. But let's talk about the CVS parking lot moment. And I related to you when when we're going through something. And I remember when I've had multiple family members die, but specifically my dad, thinking, shouldn't the world stop? I mean, my dad is dying, or my dad just died. And then you're trying to navigate something as simple as going into CVS, but your dad hadn't died yet, but you're in CVS trying to buy, like, what did you say, like a protein drink or something?
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
should I buy a 4-pack or a 12-pack? Like, how long is he actually going to be here? And it's like the simple thought, it's so overwhelming. And then you went out in the CVS parking lot and just had a breakdown. Talk about that a little bit, because that's when I told you I felt like I was sitting in the passenger seat crying with you.
Yeah.
Right there.
Well, I'm glad you don't feel uncomfortable laughing, because hopefully, and I want to highlight this, there's a lot of humor in this book.
Yeah.
And it's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Because my job as a writer is to take you on a journey. Mm-hmm. And that was how I approached this book. Like, we're going, are you ready? Let's dig in. And the moments where it gets your heart may be aching with me, within a page or within a sentence, you're going to be laughing your ass off.
Yes.
So
very true. It's like the wave analogy. It's the wave. It's like you're taking us in the waves again, because that's how I felt. I was in tears with you. And then all of a sudden I'm laughing as tears are coming down my face. And then I was back in tears. I was like up and down, but it was beautiful. It was so beautiful too. And it stretched my heart bigger to really be able to bring in more grief in my own life. So, and I think that anyone that reads the book will have the same experience. It's a beautiful journey. So we can go back to
CVS.
Back to CVS. Here we are in the parking lot.
Yeah. So I love that scene stood out for you. I think the gist of that scene was, it was not the top of my journey, but it was at a time when I was still really struggling to allow the tears. Yeah. To allow the full weight of the pain. Yeah. And at this point, I'm in anticipatory grief, right? So I'm in a place where he's still here. I'm about to go back with the insurer and see him and show him that I got his favorite chocolate mocha. And I'm like losing my shit in the parking lot because I'm in the future of him being gone and not knowing how many to buy. And I was rushing out of CVS because as soon as I felt the waves of emotion come, I was like, oh God. Yeah. Here I am. There's no place for me to hide. There's no place for me to cry. And it was funny because you get a lot of advice along the way. And some of the advice that I got was so damn funny that I had to put it in the book, which was like, only cry in the shower because nobody will see you and you won't run your mascara. And I tried that for a long time until that moment where I was like, okay, there's no shower stall. There's full mascara. Yeah. What do I do? Yeah. I'm running out. It's already leaking everywhere. This woman's, going by like, oh, dear, are you okay? You know what I mean? And I just get to the car and it just unloads. And then I have this epiphany of like, after the storm passes, am I better? Am I healed? Is it cured? No, but I feel lighter. Mm-hmm. I feel lighter. I feel like it was such a beautiful release. And I thought, if this is how it feels, why have I been denying myself this feeling of relief? And if we think about our emotions too, not only are they information, but they're energy. Yep. I was just letting that energy out and it felt really good. What if we don't let it out? Let's talk about that for a little bit. I love the look on your face. What if we don't? Can we call it stuck grief? What do you want to call it? Grief that we're not releasing, grief that we're not feeling. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that there's like an official term for it. I love that you talk about what if we don't let that energy out. So why don't
Mhm.
we just call it energy for the
It is
purpose of,
energy. It
yeah,
is. Yeah, for sure.
keeping it simple. I can tell you how it happens in my own life, and I think everybody else has their own experience. But in the past, before I kind of cleaned up my diet and my lifestyle a bit, it would and got a little bit more connected to myself. It might have come out in drugs. It might have come out in excessive drinking. It might have come out in, destructive relationships.
Mhm.
My point is that it comes out some way, and it can come out the front door, which is a little healthier, often a
Mhm.
lot healthier. It can come out the back door,
Yeah.
and the back door is kind of wild and unwieldy. And if it doesn't come out, then what happens is that we shove it into our tissues. I call it the issues in the tissues,
Yep.
and that's when the body starts to break down.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that, anybody should say, oh, it's my fault. I never expressed the hurt I had with
Mhm.
my whoever, and now I'm sick. And so it's my fault because I didn't do that. And like, no,
Right.
stay away from that
Yeah.
territory.
Yeah.
Um, my point is that we hold so much in our bodies.
Mhm.
And what we want to do is find ways to express that, what we hold, express through therapy, specifically, I'd say
Mhm.
first and foremost,
Yeah.
because it lightens the load on not only our bodies, but our spirits.
Yeah. Because it can lead to dis-ease.
Yeah. And
We're
disease
not,
too.
yeah, if we're not careful. Again, and I'm with you all the way, like no judgment, blame, shame on ourselves. Like we're all doing we really are doing the best we can. So, but I do want to encourage everybody to start at least dipping their toe in the pool when it comes to feeling emotions. And yes, grief can feel scary, overwhelming, but please do start just journaling, sitting with, turning the hose on to a trickle and starting to allow yourself to feel it, right? Just a little bit, a little bit at a time. And then you can turn the hose off. You don't have to leave it on. It's not a fire hose. Just let it come in a little bit and through you. And this is a lot that we talk about in the adult chair. It's learning how to feel our emotions. And unfortunately, we weren't taught how to do that very, very well. A lot of us, I shouldn't say all of us, but so many of us. So it can feel so overwhelming. So, how do you encourage people to really, really look at their grief or that might feel stuck in it? Like, how do you encourage people to, hey, let's take a look at this or let's start feeling this? Is there a
Yeah.
method or anything that you use?
There's a lot of different ways. There isn't one. I do always come back to therapy because I've been in therapy for over 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I would have the emotional intelligence that I continue to try to develop
Yeah,
if I didn't have like everybody needs a coach, like I'm a coach, every coach needs a coach.
true.
And so I'd say that's a step that's been very helpful for me. Journaling, as you said, I know myself more because of the writing process. Writing this book was
Mm.
for me and for everybody else, but it was very much for me.
Yep.
Right. So I think that there's something that's so, so magical about getting to know yourself more, because that's really what journaling is about. You could even just write at the top of the page, how are you today? Like
Yeah.
talk to yourself,
Yep.
and don't judge what comes out. It's none of your business. You know what I'm saying? It's just get it out onto the page. Um, for when you said, oh, how do you not think about cancer all the time? I did in the beginning, but I really don't anymore. And
Mm.
it's because it's become a practice for me to do my very best to realize when I'm in fear-based thoughts and I'm in anxious ruminations,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to say, oh, this is what my brain does,
Yeah.
then bring myself back to the present moment, because there was a good amount of time where I could be on a beautiful walk. And I love hiking and walking in nature,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not really on the walk because for whatever reason, now I am like Deborah Winger in terms of endearment.
Yeah.
And Shirley MacLaine is my mother, and I'm saying goodbye
Yeah.
to my two sons, and I don't have children. Okay.
Yeah.
So but I'm there
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to being on that walk when a beautiful little chipmunk goes by and a cardinal that I always equate with my grandmother goes by.
Mm-hmm.
And so just being able to say, in this moment, I'm in my sneakers on
Mm-hmm.
my favorite walk. I am not Deborah Winger,
So-
and I'm just not,
yeah,
but
yeah.
we humans, we spiral out a lot. And um, that's why, to answer your question, I actually don't think about it very much. I think
Mhm.
about it when I need to think about it. I think about it before a CAT scan. I think about
Yeah,
it when,
yeah.
there's other things in my life that I need to be like, yes, this is one of those moments where it's important for me to think about this. Um,
But you're really, it sounds to me like you're very conscious about it. So
right.
you bring it in when it's necessary. And when it's not necessary, you are aware that it's coming in. And then you go, wait a minute, let me bring myself back to the moment using a little mindfulness. Beautiful.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's when
Yeah.
kind of like the
Beautiful.
answer to my question, your question rather. Sometimes if you're stuck to it, could be that,
Mhm.
I find that we can't always solve the problems of the mind with the mind.
Right.
You can't think your way out of
Cannot.
an anxiety attack. Sometimes literally changing the channel might be like, I have to start moving. I got to go to a 10-minute HIIT class. I
Mhm.
gotta do something vigorous because I have to get out of this, almost like what I have experienced as like brain rot,
Yeah.
like a dog licking a hot spot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it could be that it's like, I got to change the channel. I got to move. I got to
Yeah.
something else besides being stuck in this moment.
Right. Speaking of stuck, I want to ask your opinion on this one. What do you say to somebody that is, let's say, lost a loved one or went through a divorce, whatever the loss is, and it's been years and they're still talking about it and living in it as if it happened, a day ago, a week ago? Tell, what is your opinion about that?
Well, a lot of compassion for the person, because to your point, then it becomes very
Mhm.
complicated.
Yeah.
Um, and so always coming from that place of compassion. But if it was a close friend of mine, I would say, Jen, I got to be honest with you. We've been talking about this for a long time. And I'm saying this because I love you. And
Yeah.
I'm saying this because it's hard for me to see you in so much pain so frequently. And I don't know if you're open to this, but I just want to slide over this number of this therapist who really helped me.
Mm.
And I just want to offer that to you because I love you and it hurts me to see you suffering so much.
Yeah, that's
Right.
beautifully said. Do you feel like there's a time frame, like if somebody has lost someone? I know sounds weird, right? But well, if I'm still sitting in my grief 3 years later, 2 years later, 10 years later, like at what point do you? Because I think
Yeah.
so much of it is like you're talking about your mind, like when you're on a walk and you have to remind yourself, hold on a second, I've got my shoes on. I'm looking around here. The sun is on my face.
Yeah.
I'm hiking. But our mind can also bring us and keep us in the experiences from our past. And it's like we get on that loop and we can't get out.
Yeah.
So, and I know that you said before you're not a grief expert. I understand that, but you're someone that does know a lot about this topic. So just
You
curious.
know, I would say that again, this is how I think. Um, every single one of us needs to do a joy inventory,
Oh, tell us
right?
more. Okay. Yeah.
So a joy inventory is just kind of looking at your life and saying, what am I in a famine?
Yeah.
How often do I experience this?
Hmm.
And am I giving myself enough resources, whatever that looks like? A resource could be just free time. A resource
Mm.
could be a tea with a friend. A resource could be therapy. It could be a fitness coach. You know what I mean? Because we know that
Yeah.
movement really, more than anything, helps with our endorphins. It helps with all the feel good hormones. Like it's a mindset game changer,
Yeah.
right? Am I giving myself the resources that would fill my joy well? Or am I just continuing to live in this joy famine? And again, it doesn't mean that, like, I can't imagine what it's like to have children because I don't have children, but I really can't imagine what it's like to lose a child. I have friends that have
Yeah.
lost children, and
Yeah.
how could I ever imagine saying, like, you should be over it by now at year 10,
Yes. For 10.
But if we can say, am I allowing myself enough joy in this life? Because at the end of the day, I read something recently that blew my socks off. Um, it was something around like an average lifespan and how many weeks we really have if we lived our average lifespan. And so, you'd have to correlate it with, like, am I female, am I male, like, or, anyway, my point is that it was something like 4,000 and change, like 4,200 weeks or something like that. And then I haven't done the math yet, but I'm 52 and, thinking like, okay, what was the average lifespan for a woman? Let's say it was like, I don't know what it is, but say you're 90.
Yeah.
Do the math. And then you could say to yourself, wow, that means I have X number of weeks. I don't say this to freak people out, but I say it as sort of like a little reality check because we're all going in the same direction.
Right.
And so while you have an opportunity to be alive, which is a blessing and a gift from my position, while you have an opportunity to be alive, life is going to kick you in the teeth and you're going to experience majestic sunrises. Right? Both of those things are going to happen. And so while you have the chance to be alive, how can you live as fully as possible, even though you've experienced enormous heartache? That's the question. And only you can answer that. The person watching, only I can answer that. Only you can answer that. But it's a question I think we should ask ourselves. Yeah. What does fully alive living look like for me? And how's my joy inventory going right now?
Ooh, that's really powerful. I just want to speak to something that you just said, which is you've had friends that have lost, and I've been thinking about my friends that have also lost children. And I unfortunately know many that have lost children and children that I very, very, very well knew. And something that I've spoken with my friends about, I'm like, how can we, I would say to them, what do you need? Like, how can I do this? And when they were in deep mourning, they said, please don't ever forget about them. Please always talk to me about them. I don't want them to be something in the past. So when I'm with those friends now, even today, I will bring up their children and say, oh, if so-and-so is here, they'd be doing this and that and the other thing to really keep them alive on some level. But I have to say the friends that have lost children, they have, and it took them a while. I'm not going to lie. It was not easy, but they eventually did go on to live their lives where they still have hard days. Right. And some of them it's been 10 plus years out, but, I think it's important too, for a lot of people to keep that memory alive, whether it's your father or a child or someone else. That helps to keep them in the present, almost like and I don't know that this is the right word, but a healthy or a loving kind of way, keeping that memory or that energy alive for that person that has gone through the loss.
I love that you shared that. And I think that that is so courageous too, because I think a lot of us feel like if I bring their name up, I'll make so-and-so sad.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make so-and-so sad. Right. But to your point, most of the people that I have spoken to, and certainly myself, if somebody brings up my dad or somebody brings up, other people that I've lost in my life or, my two dogs, it's actually, it's a bittersweet thing, but it's more sweet than bitter. It's just, even recently I've learned a few new stories about my dad, and it's just so wonderful to continue to get to know him, even though he's no longer here in the physical form. And also I will say, like, sharing his words and sharing this book and being able to talk to people like you is very heartwarming for me because his memory is still alive. I remember when I finished the audio recording for the audiobook, and it was the last day, and I was on the last 2 pages, and I kept stumbling and like basic words I couldn't get out. And I was getting mad at myself, like, come on, pull it together, dude. And I realized, oh, this is also what grief looks like, because once you're done with this audiobook, this is just another chapter that you're closing. And being able to read this book out loud, I was reliving so much, including so many things that were really fun and beautiful. And I was sad, and I didn't realize that.
Oh, this has been such a beautiful conversation. I want to thank you for coming on today. Thank you. And I was thinking about that when you're reading your book. I'm like, yeah, of course you didn't want to finish that book, because that was like the end. It was like another ending, right? Another grief to go through. Kris Carr. And I'm, again, for people watching, here's the book. It is absolutely beautiful. And I felt like I was right there with you the whole time, like you're talking to me. So thank you. This is such an easy book to read and a beautiful book. And will help anyone that is going through. And again, we're all going to go through grief. So go get this book. Tell us, Kris Carr, where do people find you? Where can they get the book, etc.?
You can find me at kriscarr.com. You can get the book anywhere books are sold. And I just want to thank you, Michelle, for such a wonderful conversation.
Aww.
You are an incredible human, and I've been a fan for a while. And so thank you for having me.
Thank you. This has been a blessing to have you on. Thank you so much for your work in the world. All right, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed the show today. Kris Carr is absolutely lovely and vulnerable, and just such a delight to have on the show. I really, really enjoyed my time with her. And do not forget, if you want the free Healthy Relationship Myths plus tips on how to improve your relationship, head on over to theadultchair.com/myths, MYTHS. Anyway, I hope that you and guys enjoyed the show. I will see you seated next week right here in the adult chair.